Hi, this is Ryan. In this video, we're going to be setting up some assets that will allow us to retarget animations from one character to another. The first thing we want to do is to create an IK rig asset for the target character. In the IK rig, I'm just going to assign the skeletal mesh. Nothing else needs to be done at the moment. The next thing we want to make is an IK Retargeter asset. Make sure Asset Settings is selected, then look in the Details panel. The first thing we want to set up is the source IK rig. For that, we'll select the mannequin IK rig. For target, we'll select my newly created IK rig. Now we can see both characters in the viewport. If you want to show or hide the skeleton, click on the viewport settings, the little eyeball, then into Bones, and select the setting for how you want to display the bones. Next, we'll deal with the op stack, which contains the rules for retargeting one character to another. I'll delete all the default ops that were created, so we can set up everything from scratch. Then we'll go into the preview settings and set up a specific animation to play. In my case, it will be a walk cycle. I want the character to be walking in place, instead of walking off screen. We can do that by going into the asset settings and unchecking Ignore Root Lock in Preview. Next, I don't want the characters on top of each other, so I'll offset the source character on the x-axis, so it's walking beside my character. For the first op, I want to retarget the pelvis from the source to the target. Click on Add New Op and select Pelvis Motion. For the mannequin, it should be already set to pelvis, and for my character, it's called Body. Once that's set, then you can see my character move around. To get the other parts of the character to move, we'll add the next op, FK chains. The FK chains haven't been defined yet for my character, so we'll do that by going back to my IK rig and defining them there. To create a chain, just select one or more bones. In the case of the root, I'll just use what it gives me, then select the Add Chain button. The pelvis is a little different. Right-click on the pelvis, and in the pop-up menu, select Set Pelvis. Now to set the spine. The neck. The head. The left clavicle. This one we need to rename. The left arm. Now the right clavicle and arm. Then the left leg. And finally, the right leg. Then we save the changes. Going back to the IK Retargeter, make sure the FK Chains op is selected. Then in the Details panel, we'll set the source chains. Initially, you'll see all the source chains are set to None. Just do down the list and set the appropriate source chain. As I'm setting each one, you'll see my character start to move in a better way. It's nice to see the character moving, but my character doesn't look quite right. The angle of the limbs don't really match the angles in the source. We can make this look better by setting a new default pose. Click on the Hierarchy tab so you can see the target skeleton. To go into the pose editing mode, click on Running Retarget so it toggles to Editing Retarget Pose. I'm going to remove the offset on the source character so I can see the two characters on top of each other and better see the differences between. Comparing my character to the mannequin, you can see my arms are angled a little more down and the legs angled more straight. To show the effect of changing the pose, I'll adjust one of the arms, then go back to Running Retarget mode so you can see how the retarget arm is now being offset. Going back to editing, I'll reset the arm by clicking on the Reset button and selecting Reset All. Currently, there is only one default pose. We can have more than one and pick which one we want to use. To create a new pose, click on the Create button and select Create. A window will open, so you can give the pose a name. I'm going to manually create a new default pose, so I'll name this Manual Default Pose. My new pose should now be the current pose. I'll go ahead and adjust the arms and hands. Then adjust the legs and feet. I can now see that my retargeting is looking better. Instead of creating the default pose manually, there's also an auto-align feature. Back in editing, I'll create another new pose and call it Auto Default Pose. Then click on the Auto-Align button and select Align All Bones with the Align method set to Direction. You can see my character was quickly aligned. Since we have the three poses, you can switch between them. Whichever pose is selected will be the one that is used for the retargeting. The poses I created only exist inside the retargeter, but we do have the option to export those poses as a pose asset, which could then be imported into another retargeter or used in other ways in the game. To export, click on the Create button and select the Export Pose Asset option. The window will open, so you can select where you want to save and what you want to name the asset. Opening the pose asset, you can find the blend value so you can blend into and out of the pose. I'll just go ahead and save out my other pose in case I ever need to re-import it back into my retargeter. Now let's get back to retargeting. I think it's looking pretty good, so I think we're ready to add the next op. So next, we're going to add the Run IK Rig op. Then click on the plus button and add the Retarget IK Goals sub-item. My IK Rig doesn't have any IK goals yet, so I'll need to create those. The mannequin already has IK goals, so I'll open up that IK Rig so I can compare and make my IK Rig similar to it. The first thing I see is that the mannequin is using a full-body IK solver. I'll set up the same thing in my character, then make sure it's selected. It's important for the solver to be selected when setting up its IK features. I'll right-click on the pelvis bone and select Set Start Bone on Selected Solver. Next is to add the IK goals. For that, I'll right-click on each tip bone of each limb and select New IK Goal. If I select one of the arm IK goals and move it around, we can see it's starting to work. The main issue I see is that the whole body is moving, which is not what we want. Going back to the mannequin and moving an IK goal around, you can see the body is not moving around so much. Selecting the IK solver and looking at the details panel, we can see the root behavior is set to pin to input. So I'll set the same thing on my character. In the mannequin, selecting one of the IK goal settings, we can see the chain depth is set to 2, so that IK goal is really only affecting the bones in that specific chain. I'll set all my IK goal setting to the same chain depth. Now when I move my arm IK goal around, we can see only the arm is being affected. As a side note, you can change the size and thickness of the IK goals by going to Asset Settings. Then in the Details panel, under Viewport Goal Settings, you can adjust the goal size and goal thickness. This should make it easier to see and select the goals. Now I'll check to make sure the limbs are bending correctly. If I select an arm IK and move it around, the arm seems to be moving and bending correctly. If I select a leg IK and move it around, the leg is not bending. This is happening because the leg was created with completely straight legs. Because the legs didn't have an initial bend, the IK doesn't know which way to bend the legs. We can fix this by giving the IK a preferred angle. This will tell the IK which way the legs should bend. To do this, we'll need to add some bone settings to the leg bones. Select the bone setting and look at the Details panel. Under the Preferred Angles section, check the Use Preferred Angles option. Now we need to figure out which axis to set for the preferred angle. When you select a bone, you'll be able to see the local axis. To make this easier to see, I'm going to change the size of the bone. If I zoom in on the knee, I can see the red X is pointing down, the blue Z is pointing forward, and the green Y is pointing to the side. For bending the leg, we want to use the Y-axis. I'll set the bone draw back to the previous value, then go back into the bone settings and change the preferred Y-axis to 10. It doesn't matter the value, as long as it's not 0. Moving the IK, the leg is now bending, but the wrong way. In the bone settings, I'll set the preferred Y-axis to -10. Doing the same on the other leg bone setting. Now when I move the IK goals, the legs are bending in the correct direction. Back in the Retargeter, the IK rig should be working. So if I turn the ops on and off, we should see the difference. Since the FK ops is working good, there's actually not much of a difference between the FK and IK ops. Let me go back into the hierarchy and change it back to the original default pose. If I toggle the IK ops on and off, we should see a difference now. It looks like something isn't working. I'll just delete the IK goal sub-op and reapply it. Now it's working. You can see the green line is indicating where the FK was positioned. I'll just switch back to the previous default pose so the FK ops is working better again. The next ops we'll add is the root motion, which is what you need if you want to use certain features like motion matching. Once you've created the root motion ops, make sure that the source and target root options are set to the root bones. Then look in the asset settings and make sure that Ignore Root Lock in Preview is checked on. You should now see the characters walking forward. You can see that with the ops on, the root bone is traveling with the character, but with it off, the root bone is staying back at origin. For the last part, let's do something a little fun. I'll make my character more like an old man. We'll go back into the hierarchy and go into Editing Retarget Pose mode, then create a new pose and call it Old Man Pose. I'll give him a bent over back, and bend his neck and head back up, then rotate his arms down. We don't want to use this as the default pose, so I'll set that back to the previous pose. Next, go back to the op stack and get out of Editing Pose mode. Then we'll add an Additive Pose op. Select it and look in the Details panel. Click in the pose to apply. Pull down and select the Old Man pose. We can drag the op to a different point in the stack. I think it looks good when it's between the FK and IK ops. I'll go ahead and turn off the Old Man op, since I don't want to apply that pose to my retargeted animations. Now we're ready to retarget our animations. I'll save my retargeter, then find any anim sequence that has the source character and right-click on it and select Retarget Animations. Uncheck Auto Generate Retargeter, then click in the Retarget Asset drop-down and select our retargeter. Then it's just a matter of searching for the animations you want to retarget. In my case, I'll search for any anim that has the words walk and loop. I'll select all of them and click on Export Animations. In the pop-up window, select a folder where you want to put the retargeted anims. You can also fill out the prefix, suffix, and search and replace fields. These will be added to each of the file names. Click on Export. You'll get another pop-up regarding batch export options. I'll click Export again, then the retargeting will happen, and my folder now contains all the retargeted anims using my SimpleDude character. Thank you for watching.